So one day I was playing on Dueling Book, and then all of a sudden I got my butt kicked by this deck. This deck surprisingly has a lot of aggro to it, and it really comes down to using vanilla cards that are 1900 attack base that are normal summonable. You could also use cards such as like Summon Skull and Blue Eyes White Dragon as tribute summon monsters that can hit harder. But not only that, I was surprised of the amounts of hand advantage it can generate too. Cards such as like Heart of the Underdog and Dark Factory and Mass Production are very key to this deck. And thanks to those attributes, we can make excellent use of Skill Drain and Regeki Break to handle most cumbersome cards in the format itself. You want to stay to the very end so that way you're equipped on how to play this deck, but also how to deal with it as well. Let's get right into it.
Final Saga has other products that I put their link in the description below if you want to check them out. And feel free to use the code commanderjaime for an additional discount and any ongoing sales combined as well.
Our strongest normal summonable monster is Luster Dragon with a 1900 attack, but also 1600 defense. Now, do keep in mind that most times we're going to have these face up in attack mode, but if your cards were ever turned into defense mode, this is respectable. Again, you got to think about GOAT format. There are respectable cards such as like Kaiku, Don Zalug, and so many other cards that have trouble dealing with this 1900 number. And luckily, we have a lot more choices too. So we also have 3 copies of Insect Knight. The only difference is 1500 defense, and of course the typing and attribute. And then we also have 3 copies of Archfiend Soldier as well. What's also really important for this card too, if you want to consider, this is a dark attribute. So you could potentially add lights to it to have access to chaos monsters too. The next set of 3 is Mad Dog of Darkness. Again, 1900 attack, also a dark attribute, followed by 2 copies of Gemini Elf. And instead of having the 3rd Gemini Elf, I'm playing 1 copy of Summon Skull. This normal monster only takes 1 tribute, so it's easier to summon. Plus 2500 gets over the Monarch, Chaos Sorcerer, Blade Knights at a 2000, also Gravekeeper Spy that are in defense mode too. You may consider bumping this up to 2 copies if you like to, or add a card such as like Blue Eyes White Dragon too. Other notable vanilla cards you want to add, just as I mentioned with the darks, you could add lights in such as X-Head Cannon. That's 1800 attack, slightly weaker, but still doable if you want to play like a BLS or a Chaos Sorcerer. You could also consider playing Battle Footballer as well as a 2100 defense. This is one approach where you can, have something that survives and then be able to tribute summon later, but do be aware of Nobleman of Crossout too. So again, most of our cards are going to be face up in attack mode. So if you start sending monsters, now you're starting to give them face down targets essentially. So just be mindful of that. Although the one effect monster that I'm main decking is Breaker. This is kind of like a pseudo 1900 attacker as well, but also having the ability to get rid of cumbersome back row, especially if you want to simplify the game save and keep on with your aggro, or even deal with other pesky cards such as like Swords of Revealing Light, Level Limit Area B, and cards like that stay on the field too. Also, here's a closer look of the ultra rares. Man, these look really nice. They're the old school ultra rares. Nice. And if you're curious about the Summon Skull, this is actually the oracles from Final Saga too. I made videos on them if you're curious too. Going into the spells, we're playing the Trinity, of course, Pot of Greed, Graceful, and Duel. Also, specifically for Graceful Charity, there's great synergy with this deck too, because essentially you're able to draw into better cards, but also discard your vanillas, so that has access to your later cards such as Premature Burial, Dark Factory, Mass Production, and so Graceful Charity shines more than the usual way. Of course, Heavy Storm and Mystical Space Typhoon to get rid of back row. We're still able to make use of Double Knock, so that way we can get rid of pesky face down monsters and be able to push more damage for that aggro essentially. Especially if you know that that face down monster is probably a spy too. We're also playing 1 copy of Premature Burial and Snatch Steal. What's also cool about this is that you're able to revive any of your strong vanillas thanks to Premature Burial, but even like Summon Skull too without needing the tribute. And there's multiple ways to discard it, of course, too. But you could also use that as tribute fodder if needed to be. Same thing with Snatch Steal. You can actually snatch somebody's monster and use that as tribute fodder for Summon Skull, or potentially just move stuff out of the way to finish the remaining damage that you're trying to push. Another card to help with this strategy of aggro is Lightning Vortex. You're able to get rid of your opponent's face-up monsters, but also discard any normal monsters into the graveyard as fuel. And now that you clear your opponent's board or troublesome monsters, you can at least get through as well. This can also deal with like BLS and other strong monsters that your normal vanillas can't get over by themselves. So this deck has a lot of great synergy with this card. We're also playing 3 copies of Heart of the Underdog. Now this card I want to slow down a little bit too. So what is this card? And so at first standalone, you may think it's not that great. Like, okay, reveal a normal monster and draw an extra card. Like, does that really benefit me, or is it just better off playing a different card? And the answer is yes, because this can trigger multiple times in a single turn. So even just having one, so if you reveal the normal monster and you draw into another normal monster, this will actually trigger again. And so you basically can keep drawing normal monsters until you see an effect one or a spell or a trap. And then if you have 2 or 3 copies, they technically do stack, but you have to be mindful how the timing works essentially. So assuming you have 2, for example, and your draw into your normal draw fate reveals that normal monster, both would trigger, and then you draw a card for each. Now the last card that you drew with, technically the card that was chain link 1 that was resolving, has to see a normal monster drawn from that one. And so assuming that you did draw a normal monster with the last one to resolve, then again, these will proc twice again. And then you draw 2 again, and then it checks again that last card drawn again. And the same thing with 3 copies. If you so happen to have all 3 on the field, you would just check the last card drawn, which is would be your 3rd card essentially, and then the 3 will trigger again, and so on. So you may be asking yourself, well, does having so many normal monsters really help? And the answer is yes, because you have access to them, but you can use them as discard fodder too, but also again make use of Graceful Charity. And with the make use of Graceful Charity, you can use cards like Dark Factory of Mass Production, as mentioned. You recover those pieces too to get massive advantage, and discard fodder for Raigeki Break too. Down to the traps, we're playing Mirror Force and Ring of Destruction. There are very powerful cards in this format. Protects your monsters, but also can deal the final blow with Ring of Destruction too. And to make it super annoying is Skill Drain. And so again, this deck can utilize it. Your monsters are literally unaffected by Skill Drain because they have no effects to begin with. So this is really hurting your opponent, especially with flip effect monsters such as like Chaos Turbo, Go Control, and other decks. Same thing with Warrior decks that you typically have access to different warriors to address different scenarios too. Now this makes it a lot useless, and it really simplifies that game state for you overall, where it becomes like, hey, I'm going to still apply the aggro. Can I keep it simple? And at that point, as long as you have that temple, you're going to win. And then lastly, 3 copies of Raigeki Break. I already mentioned it. This is like fueled by the discard fodder that we generate from Dark Factory of Mass Production, and then being able to set up those vanilla monsters for premature burial, but then of course, while getting rid of cumbersome cards, whether it be spells, traps, or monsters too. This is super helpful against the big ones, such as like BLS, for example, but also like the face downs in case you don't want to deal with that too. So Raigeki Break is really good for this type of deck. And so this deck is pretty straightforward. You just need a couple games to get a feel for it too. It's very effective for what it does. And if you're new to GOAT format or new to this channel, definitely check out my next deck guide in this playlist. Till next time, amigos. Bye.